There are various changes to transport regulations for the lockdown at level 4. Public train services will resume in limited numbers, but air travel is still banned. Buses and taxis have been ordered to carry fewer passengers at a time and ensure strict hygiene control. Silindelo Masikane is following the story for us. She joins us now live from the newsroom. So, Sli, a very detailed briefing. What were some of the highlights?
Certainly, Shahan, we are officially in lockdown level 4, and of course regulations have to be adjusted in order to accommodate those that are returning to work. And what we saw today was the Transport Minister going through basically through every sector in terms of his department when it comes to maritime, when it comes to aviation, when it comes to public transport in general, around what will be allowed and not allowed. And what we've seen coming out of today's briefing is, of course, that aviation, in terms of aviation travel, still remains banned unless it is, of course, for repatriation purposes. And what we also are seeing is that public transport hours, in terms of operating hours, have been extended. They will be allowed to operate from 5 in the morning until 7 p.m. at night, with a grace period of an hour to ensure that they have offloaded all their passengers by the time curfew hits. No public transport will be allowed to operate during curfew, but what has also been added is that metered taxis as well as e-hailing services can also operate during these hours, as well as charter services as well as chauffeur services have also been added to the list. Let's just take a listen to Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula around aviation.
Due consideration will be given to mining and agricultural sector to allow limited movement of aircrafts, either to transport essential workers by chartered aircrafts or to spray pesticides on crops. All these movements will be subject to approval and permits will be issued on a case-by-case basis. No scheduled domestic flights will be permitted in level 4. This is determined by the risk-adjusted strategy, which guides the easing of restrictions. Once the alert level moves to level 3, limited movement of scheduled domestic flights will be allowed. It is only when the country's alert level reaches level 2 that will fully open our airspace and allow movement of both domestic and international flights.
So strict measures, of course, also in the taxi industry.
Certainly. Now, what's also come out, Shahan, is that we understand that while the public transport industry will be able to operate during these extended hours, they're also going to have to ensure that they are adhering to the safety regulations around social distancing, around maintaining that they don't overload their taxis. They're only allowed to operate with around 70% in terms of capacity, and with the e-hailing services, they're only allowed 50% of capacity. All passengers must be wearing masks, must be sanitized before entering the taxis. This is now officially law. Let's take a listen to the minister once again.
All road-based public transport services are permitted to operate from 5 until 19 hours, with a grace period of 1 hour in the afternoon to complete their trips and drop off passengers. Because you know that curfew is taking place from 8 o'clock at night to 5 a.m. in the morning. This includes minibus taxis, buses, metered taxis, e-hailing services, charter and shuttle services. No public transport is allowed on the road between 20 hours, 8 o'clock in the evening, and 5 a.m. in the morning. Sanitization principles currently applicable to public transport vehicle and facilities remain. Meaning sanitization principles and a mask are mandatory, it's compulsory. You don't enter a taxi or a bus without a mask or being sanitized. Government will support sanitization of public transport and will also support with masks. But public in general is expected it has been made easy that you can produce your own mask. When you approach public areas, you travel, you interact with whoever, you are in a public taxi, you are in a bus, you are in a train, you must have a mask. It's compulsory.
So let's talk a bit more about the train services that the Minister spoke about. Sli, what is he saying regarding that?
Well, in terms of trains, what we understand, the Minister is saying that in terms of the metro rail services, those are going to remain at a halt for now. The only train services that's going to be allowed to operate during this period, this level 4 period, will be the Gau train, subject to, of course, safety regulations around social distancing, as well as ensuring that people are not sitting too close together. The department says they need to first see whether the metro rail services will be able to implement the safety regulations that are needed in terms of loading people into trains. Let's take a listen to him once again.
There will be no trains on Monday. That must be absolutely clear. I've seen other people making claims that there will be trains and so on. So there will be no trains on Monday. And the Command Council, once it declares level 3, with the return of the Pienaarsport line in Tshwane and the southern line in Cape Town, will be the first ones which will be considered. There will be no immediate resumption of metro rail commuter services until we have satisfied ourselves that the risk of transmission is manageable on a corridor-by-corridor basis.
The Minister also clarifying details of the 7-day travel grace period.
Certainly, that grace period, Shahan, beginning today. So those who are stuck in our 9 provinces across the country where they either were there on holiday or possibly visiting over, just before Easter, before the lockdown, and essentially got stuck there once the lockdown was announced, they will be allowed to travel back to their hometowns where they're working during today as well as the next 6 days. This is going to last until the 7th of May, and what we understand is that long-distance buses as well as taxis will be allowed to operate subject to safety regulations once again. So everybody must be wearing a mask, everybody must be sanitized, and it's only between this grace period that people will be allowed to travel back to their various provinces. After that, it's back to lockdown in terms of interprovincial traveling. Let's take a listen one more time to Minister Fikile Mbalula.
The movement is not allowed between districts, metropolitan and provinces. It's not allowed. You are allowed from today till the 7th of May to rearrange your setup, not to visit friends and all of that. To rearrange your setup, you are a student or you are a doctor or whatever that you are, when the lockdown was announced, you were caught up somewhere, and you've been so much disciplined and adhering to the law, you did not even attempt to travel at night, 12 o'clock. You have stayed true to the regulations. You are now allowed, as a law-abiding citizen, to then go back to where you belong.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Our reporter Silindelo Masikane following.